Hey everyone. Welcome back to Strange Mind 6. I'm your host Ruby, and today we're going to be getting back into Before the Claws That Catch Alice by Christina Henry. But before we begin, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It would mean a great deal to me if you do. And before we begin, grab a snack, grab a drink, or sit back and relax. And let's get into Chapter 15. Alice's heart was in her mouth. She had not intended this, that he would declare himself before the walrus and all the gathered throng. Her mind had been concocting plans of secrecy, spiriting away the poor rabbit in the dark of night. The walrus stepped from the shadow in the light of the ring. His face was wide, with long whiskers that ran down his jaw, and the eyes were small and cruel. The whip dragged on the floor beside him, loosely clutched in one huge hand. A huge, gloved hand. Huge hands in white gloves, slicing a large piece of cake and urging her to eat more. A heavy, frightening laugh as Alice shoveled the cake into her mouth, not knowing how to stop even though she wanted to, even though her stomach hurt and her head spun in circles. The same dark voice speaking. Alice wasn't supposed to hear. You told me I could have her, that you bought her for me. And I did, the second voice soothing. But it is my right to break her first. She's no good to me if you break her magic. The voice growled. And then Alice knew that harm was coming to her, and she tried to run, but the man with the gloved hands caught her, held her with his giant grip, and the rabbit smiled, stroking his hand over her hair, pulling her braid until it hurt. Pretty little Alice, he crooned. Why do you want to leave the party so soon? The walrus, the grinder, whatever he was called, he was the other man at the party. Dor had sold Alice to the rabbit, and the rabbit had intended to give her to the walrus to be eaten. It was even more horrible than being the rabbit's toy. The walrus had meant to eat her, to take her magic away, to become a magician himself, and so stand as an equal with the caterpillar, the rabbit, and Cheshire. Now Hatcher taunted the walrus and might be killed, all because she felt sorry for the poor rabbit forced to fight in the ring, for the walrus's amusement. Nicholas, the walrus said. His voice sent shudders of fear down Alice's spine. It was a voice that had forgotten how to be human, how to love and care and fear the darkness. It was part of the darkness now. His heart mirrored in greed and desire and pain. So you do remember me, Hatcher said. The walrus clenched his jaw. How could I forget? Though I understand they don't call you Nicholas anymore. He gestured at the axe in Hatcher's hand, and Hatcher nodded in acknowledgement. Everyone was silent and still, watching the walrus and Hatcher. Recently, I had some of my men across town I sent some of my men across town to do business for me, the walrus continued. Some of those men did not return. They were found in a tavern with axe marks all over their bodies. Hatcher said nothing. Alice wished she could see his face. His body was relaxed, completely unconcerned. A girl came to me, just a little serving wench with only half a brain, telling me a story about a madman who killed all the men in one blow, a madman who was accompanied by a girl dressed as a boy. The walrus scanned the crowd behind Hatcher. Alice did not breathe. If the walrus saw her, he would recognize her in a second. There was something special about this girl who accompanied the madman, according to this little tale-telling fool, he said. Something I could hardly countenance. As a matter of fact, but then some of my men also spoke of a shadow, a monster that drank the blood of the dead. Do you know that some of my best soldiers wake up at night screaming now, scared that this creature will come for them? I knew then the stories the serving wench told must be true, for only a magician could raise such a creature. Alice nearly laughed aloud. The walrus thought she had raised the Jabberwocky, that she could control it. As if she would ever want to do such a thing, as if such a monster could be controlled. The walrus paced slowly in Hatcher's direction. The men on the benches in front of Hatcher rapidly dispersed in his approach, causing a sudden stampede toward the exit. Alice was pushed against the wall, elbowed in the stomach and neck and face as men fought to escape before something terrible happened. There was definite sense in the air that something terrible would happen, and that you did not want to be in its path. The skinny fighter slipped out of the ring. Following the joyously crowd, the rabbit tried to crawl away from the walrus, his paws inching across the dirty floor, his back bleeding from the strike of the whip. The walrus kicked him, and the rabbit cried out, "Leave him alone!" Alice said. The last of the gamblers trickled out, though the sound of their passage, shouting voices, trampling feet, echoed back into the nearly empty room. All that remained was Alice and Hatcher, the walrus and the rabbit. "Ah, there you are, my Alice. I've been expecting you for so long. I could hardly believe it when that stupid servant girl told me you were alive," the walrus said. He gave her a look, a long look, up and down as she went to Hatcher's side. "You've gotten quite skinny, hardly enough meat on your bones to bother with." He showed her his teeth, small and dirty and copper-stained. Alice gave him a cool appraisal in return. Inside she was trembling, her heart hammering away, but she would not show it. She would not give this monster what he wanted. "You've gotten quite fat. I doubt you're fast enough to catch me in any case. The walrus is quite an apt name for you." The walrus lashed out with the whip then. It might have struck Alice's face, given her a mark on the other cheek to match the one from the rabbit, but for Hatcher, he sliced the end of the whip cleanly away before it could reach her. the blade so close she felt the breeze made by its passing. The tip fell to the ground with a loud clatter, and Alice saw that the leather was edged in silver, so that it would hurt more than when it struck. She gave the walrus a look of disgust. "You think you're quite a man, don't you?" she said, "torturing creatures weaker than you, because you're afraid of a fair fight." "I fear nothing," the walrus said. A sudden thought occurred to Alice. "What about me?" His lips twisted in a smile of disbelief. "Afraid of a skinny girl? You're nothing without your guard dog." "Now you know that's not true, walrus," Alice said in a schoolteacher tone. "You said yourself your men returned telling tales of a monster made of darkness, and that some of them wake up screaming. Ruined they are," Walrus said, his voice bitter. Alice noticed he had been speaking very deliberately before, that his accent had been well bred, and now it slipped away a little. "What am I to do with a bunch of mewling babies? I sent my best men out, and carpenter's soldiers were nothing but a lark to them. But you were there with your illusions." Alice couldn't help it. She laughed. Hatcher gave her an odd look. The walrus's face registered surprise at her total lack of fear. "He thinks the Jabberwocky is an illusion," she said, giggling. Hatcher laughed too. Then long and loud, the walrus stared at the two of them. "You're not telling me that it's real?" The walrus scoffed. "You don't frighten me, it's all talk. A show you put on to drive my men away." "Well, you can think what you like," Alice said. "You'll know better when he comes this way. He's quite real, and he's not attached to a leash." Alice hoped the walrus would think the Jabberwocky was her pet, but that she had loosened him for reasons of her own. She'd liked it very much if he were afraid of her, she realized. She wanted him to quake and cry, as so many girls no doubt had before he'd finished with them. "I'll believe it when I see it," the walrus said, but Alice thought she saw concern that hadn't been there before. She stepped out of the bench then, and into the ring. Hatcher stayed where he was. Alice knew he would make certain the walrus would not touch her. The big man shuffled his feet a little, not backing away from her, but unable to conceal his uncertainty at her behavior. She was not acting like girls usually acted in his presence, she knew. But she was not interested in the walrus. The rabbit had continued its slow progress toward the edge of the ring, panting with the effort. Alice veered away from the walrus, deliberately turning her back to him. She had to trust Hatcher now. Without him, the walrus would try to take her. Would have tried already. He was off balance from her behavior, but he would soon remember that he considered her nothing more than a thing to be used and thrown away. The rabbit paused as it heard her approach, its eyes wide with fear. She held her hands up to show she meant no harm. "Shh," she said. "Shh. I won't hurt you. It's only a dumb beast." The walrus jeered. "He thinks you'll kick him like all the rest. He can't understand you." "Yes, he can," Alice said, and smiled encouragingly at the rabbit as she knelt beside him. "What are you called?" She could see that disbelief mixed with hope in his expression. His mouth moved, at first making no noise. Then a surprising baritone emerged. "Pipkin," he said. "That's a lovely name. Like the name a mother gives its littlest one." Alice said, stroking the rabbit's paw. The fur was matted and gray. "I was the smallest of my litter," he said. "Not that you would know it now. Do you think you can try and sit up, Pipkin?" The rabbit shook his head. "My legs are broken." "In this fight?" Alice asked. She had not seen the skinny man strike such a blow. "Before this," he said, "they have been broken for 3 days. But the walrus has forced me to fight for him anyway, and whipped me when I was unable to stand. He was angry that the rats escaped, so angry." "Why didn't they take you with them?" "I was already broken," Pipkin said. "I couldn't run, and they had their children to think of." "What's he saying?" the walrus demanded. "You understand all that squeaking?" Alice ignored him. "I wish I could do something for you, Pipkin. I wish I could help you stand." "Stand again." A little breeze whistled past her ear, and she thought it sounded like "wish granted." And then even softer, so soft she almost entirely sure. She imagined it. "Remember, a wish has power." A small violet bottle appeared in her left hand. On the label was the face of a smiling cat. A tag attached to the neck read, "For Pipkin." She could only hope it would not harm the rabbit further. Cheshire clearly watched over them, but Alice was unsure why. His help wasn't always helpful either. She was still irritated about the maze and the creature that had nearly eaten Hatcher. "Drink this," she said to Pipkin. "It will make you better." "Where'd you get that?" the walrus said, then caught a glimpse of the label. "That damned Cheshire! Damned interfering little pipsqueak!" Wind rustled through the room again, and it sounded like laughter. Cheshire was the only one who'd given the walrus the potion to make rabbits and rats large in the first place, and so it was only right, in Alice's mind, that he provided the cure. Pipkin opened his mouth so Alice could pour the mixture in. He swallowed, closing his eyes and placing his head back on the ground. Alice waited. Pipkin groaned. His body contorted. Still she waited. The rabbit's body went stiff and straight as a board, his face a rictus of pain. Then Alice saw his tooth, the broken tooth, grow its proper size again and match its mate. All of Pipkin's fur fell off his body, suddenly, as though someone had sheared him, and fresh new white fur grew, and just as fast, covering the scars on his back. His left foot tapped the ground in a rapid tattoo, and then he burst up in a tremendous leap, soaring high above Alice and landing before the walrus. He rested on all fours like a proper rabbit, instead of one playing at being human. He was suddenly very beautiful, and Alice thought very fierce. She had never noticed before that rabbits had such very sharp claws. Alice stood and went to his side. It was like standing beside an enormous polar bear. She'd heard a story about polar bears once, though she couldn't remember where. Glossy and dangerous, the walrus did not appear very much like a monster now. He looked like a child who'd been caught doing wrong and knew his punishment loomed. "How long have you been here?" Alice asked, rubbing her hand into Pipkin's ruff. The fur was so soft she wanted to bury her face in it, but that probably wasn't polite. She'd only just met this rabbit after all. "I don't know how long in human time, and I couldn't see the moon to show the passing of seasons, but I am much older than I was when I first arrived. The walrus took me in from my mate and children, from a place in the country far away from all the filth and stink of this city. He brought me here and fed me potions and made me large so he could use me to fight. Some people were apparently getting tired of watching rats and wanted exotic creatures. There was a cat too, and a horse, and 3 dogs. What happened to them?" Alice said. She watched the walrus very closely. He was cornered now. The cornered animals will behave unpredictably. "They died," Pipkin said, and snarled in the walrus's face. The big man took a step back, then 2. Then his legs knocked against the first row of the benches around the ring. The walrus glanced from Alice to Hatcher to Pipkin. "I thank you for helping me," Pipkin said, "and it seems as though you have some history with this man and came seeking revenge." "Not on purpose," Alice said. "We hadn't intended to come here at all, but since it happened, Hatcher thought it best to finish the job he started long ago." Alice knew the walrus could not understand the rabbit, but he certainly could understand her. "Hatcher, as you call him, hasn't a chance of finishing me," the walrus said, but his voice was not as steady as it should have been. I don't think I'll have to now," Hatcher said softly, exchanging a look with the rabbit. Pipkin nodded at him. "I thank you for your consideration. I have witnessed too many atrocities here to leave without avenging them." Alice did not translate for Hatcher. He seemed to understand. "Before you do that, I wish the walrus to tell me something," Alice said. "Where is the rabbit?" The walrus's eyebrows raised. "Going to him? Going to do him in, are you? Knock us all down one by one, a falling house of cards. First the caterpillar, then me, then the rabbit. My business is no concern of yours. You can tell me where to find him. though it will not redeem what you would have done to me. You were supposed to be mine, the walrus said through his teeth. The rabbit promised, and somehow you got away. I haven't been able to find another magician since, though I've eaten all the girls I could find, hoping I might stumble on another who didn't know her own power. For a moment she felt sick, sicker than when she'd been in the room with all the stacked girls in the storage room. All these years, all these lives lost because a walrus was searching for someone like Alice. All those girls died because Alice had not. She wanted to weep, but the time for weeping had passed. Something hardened inside Alice, a piece of her heart that would forever be cold and untouchable. One day long ago, she'd gone seeking an adventure and found terror instead. That day had changed the course of her life and left her hands awash in blood. It was not her fault, but this was how it must be. She understood that now. Tell me where the rabbit is, Alice said. The walrus laughed, and it was not a pleasant laugh. I should send you right to his doorstep and let you both take what's coming to you. In this deck of cards, he is the king, and even with your butcher at your side, you'll find you won't knock him down so easily. I did before, Alice said. I was drugged, and he raped me. And I was terrified, but I still took his eye. I still got away. You surprised him, the walrus said. That won't happen again. You needn't worry about it, Alice said. You'll be dead in any case. Yes, the walrus said. I will, so there's no reason for me to make your job easier. Find the rabbit yourself. Alice glanced at Hatcher, wondering whether it would be worth trying to force the information from the walrus. Hatcher shook his head. She went to Hatcher then, and they turned to leave. He's yours, Pipkin, Alice said. She did not hear the rabbit lunge, but she heard the walrus scream. Alice did not look back. It was enough to know the monster was dying, and would soon join the ranks of women he had destroyed. Alice did not know what happened to the soul after death, but if there was any justice in this world, then all those dead girls would haunt the walrus until the stars explode and time came to an end. She and Hatcher exited the ring and entered a passageway at the top of the arena. It was nothing but plain wooden walls and a dirt floor, and it showed the passing of many feet. There was a staircase at the end, and Alice presumed it led into the streets. She imagined the walrus would not have wanted common gamblers to see the rest of his operations. Hatcher started for the stairs, but Alice stayed him. Something had occurred to her. What if there are other girls here? Alive ones? Hatcher asked. She nodded. We ought to ask Pipkin if he knows. They returned to the ring, where the walrus was now many small and unrecognizable pieces. The stench was horrific, though It did not seem to bother Pipkin. He turned toward them as they returned, with a quizzically look on his face. His muzzle was coated in fresh blood, very red against his white fur. Pipkin, are there any other imprisoned here? Alice asked. She removed her coat, placing the knife in the rope that held up her pants. May I? Pipkin nodded, and Alice wiped the blood from his face with her jacket. Very handsome, she said. There are many girls sold to men, Pipkin said. I could hear them screaming from my cage. There are also some that the walrus saved for his own use. Hatcher sighed. We're crusaders now, are we? We're going to free all these girls and send them to the streets helpless? They won't be helpless, Pipkin said. I will stay with them. Alice translated this. Hatcher appeared doubtful that an oversized rabbit would defend a pack of crying girls from the men who would prey on them. Alice narrowed her eyes at him, so these doubts were not voiced aloud. And a wonderful champion you will be. Do you know where they are? Pipkin nodded and gestured with his head toward the opposite side of the ring. What about the walrus's soldiers? Some of them are loyal to him, Pipkin said, though most of them came broken after the raid on Carpenter. The ones remaining are frightened by the tales they've heard, and only keep working because the walrus frightens them. Alice quickly told Hatcher what Pipkin said. Hatcher considered. It shouldn't be so difficult, then, to get the girls out. Yes, Alice said. Lead the way, Hatcher said. And that is the end of chapter 15, my dear friends. Please tune in next video for chapter 16 to see what happens and if they locate more girls to free them. This has been Ruby, signing off, my dear, dear friends. May you have a wonderful morning, noon, or night whenever this video reaches you.